Hello and welcome back to another flute tip of the week. You know, I'm quite happy this week. They finally figured out what's happening with my shoulder, so I thought I would wear one of my favorite shirts to commemorate the occasion. For those of you who don't follow me on Instagram, they have figured out that what's going on with my shoulder is that I have tendinitis as a result of the bursa joint in my shoulder getting too thick, encircling my muscle and my tendon and causing them to swell. So it is not a result of playing the flute, it was just something that couldn't really be controlled. I am so happy to finally know what's wrong. And they said that the treatment is going to be a steroid injection into the muscle and into the tendon, and then I'll have to have some physio. But hopefully that'll all happen soon and I'll be able to flute properly again. One project I've been doing recently is working with a sound engineer, and we're doing electronic music with flute as its main instrument. I was recording some of the sections for it and I realized that because the bass flute has the curved head joint, it is low enough that I don't need to raise my shoulder to be able to play. And so I'm actually able to play the bass flute without it hurting a lot. And this is fantastic because it means that it is time for a practical flute tip of the week. So get your flutes and get your metronomes. To practice your steadiness, set your metronome to play at the start of every bar and then at the start of every second bar. Normally when we use metronomes for practice, we will set it on the beat or on the off beat so that we know that every single section is down and steady. But sometimes when we go from using the metronome on every beat to not using it at all, while we'll be able to maintain things really well for a few beats, there are occasions where you might find yourself rushing or slowing down, but not really able to pinpoint where in the bar that happens. Because every time you practice it with the metronome, you just have it on every beat. So a way to combat this is to practice with your metronome first at the start of every bar, and then at the start of every other bar. And this will really test you to see if you are keeping in time. And rhythm and time are, in my opinion, the two most important parts of music making. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the first few lines of the Bach partita, and I'm going to set the metronome to play at every beat first so that you can see what tempo I am trying to maintain. For this example, I'm going to play at 77. Okay, now I'm going to have the metronome going at the start of every bar. Now that I'm comfortable with that, I'm going to have it playing at the start of every other bar. This is going to be a real tell of how steady I'm able to keep it. Remember, with Baroque music especially, there is a bit of give and take within the bars as long as you always come back to where it needs to be settled. In terms of not just playing metronomically, you want it to still have breathing room and you want it to still feel organic, but it needs to be within the bar and it needs to be within the pace. Right now I have it set so that the crotchet is at 77. However, I'm really curious how far I can push this in terms of multiple bars without any beats until hearing the metronome again. So I have the metronome set to 37 for the minute, and I have it set to hit every 6 beats. So that'll be every 3 bars that we will hear it. So let's see what this sounds like. You know, it wasn't directly on, but I'm pretty happy with that. And it's little things like this that you can do that will really give you the peace of mind that you're able to keep the same pace and the same general pulse even when you are moving within the beats. And it's this kind of focus that also allows you to be really steady and confident when you're playing in a chamber music scenario. It's much harder to play in tempo alone than it is in tempo with others, for the most part. So again, that tip was to test your steadiness. Set your metronome to play at the start of every bar or the start of every other bar. I hope you find this week's tip helpful. So fun that I got to break this guy out and that I was able to play without it hurting. Why didn't I figure this out before? I'll see you all next week. Flute happy, metronome happy, bass flute happy, baby. For today's talking head, I thought I would tell you the story behind one of the pictures in my house. So a few years ago when I was living in my last apartment, I was sitting on my own in my living room when all of a sudden I heard something clatter. And I look outside and I see a baby magpie sitting on the trash can lid. There was no mom around. It had just fallen out and there was nothing around and it couldn't figure out how to get away. So I waited about a half hour to really be sure that I wasn't going to be messing with anything. Then I put on some gloves and I went out and I just picked up the lid and I carried it to a fence where it had lots of leaves and was the only place where it could have fallen from. And I put him right there and he hopped off and then looked at me and then hopped back on the lid and came up to me and basically just whistled at me as if saying thank you. And then he hopped away. So here is the picture that I took of that moment. He was such a cute little guy. I really hope he's still out there and wreaking havoc on people's bins.